It's time now for Real Hope. Join us as we explore our real hope in Jesus Christ. This program is brought to you by Hope Lutheran Church, located at 5200 Emerson Avenue North in Minneapolis.
Hello and welcome to Real Hope. I'm Leanne Christensen and I'm here with Pastor Tom Parrish of Hope Lutheran Church in North Minneapolis. This week we have a very special guest, Chris Rush, and he's with Allhandsondeck movement. And yesterday he started talking about his book. It's all very exciting. And as I said yesterday, this is unlike any of our shows that we've ever done before. And we've had special guests on our shows and they've all truly been special. But the dynamic of this program and the power that the Lord has put behind it, I think, is very special. Don't you agree, Pastor?
I agree. You know, in my nearly 45 years, 50 years of being involved or talking about Christian radio or listening to it, there are very few people that I've ever heard really talk about these kind of issues that Chris is willing to take on. And I think that's why I call him a modern-day prophet. He blushes when I say that. But I do believe the Lord raises up prophets in every generation, and I believe that we have to have this prophetic voice, because without this prophetic voice, the church will never be what Jesus intended it to be. And Jesus is serious about the gates of hell will not prevail against his church. So he's raising up voices. I believe Chris is one of those, and we're going to continue to talk about the abolitionist movement and what that means in modern-day abortion. And so, Chris, I want to begin by asking you this. Why do you think the Lord singled you out? And I know he's called many people. I'm not saying you're the only one, but why did he single you out? Why has he led you into this abolitionist movement? And explain to us what abolition really is.
Right. Okay, so I'll go back, and you may not know this, but I had a dream once that a group of people were telling me to run for mayor in Minneapolis. Now, I never thought about this once. They were in this dream, they were convincing me you should run for mayor. And I'm like, are you guys crazy? They're like, you should do it. You will win. When I came out of the dream, I knew that the dream was to run for mayor to end abortion. And so I just shelved the dream because I'm like, I don't know, run for mayor. I Googled how to run for mayor, but didn't know, where to start with that. Well, later on, as the Lord begins to speak to me, All Hands on Deck, in a nutshell, there's a movie, very powerful movie, I believe God might have been in the book, called Horton Hears a Who. In a nutshell, Horton's an elephant in the jungle. He finds a speck that has life in it. The jungle wants to kill the speck because they think Horton's crazy. And there's a mayor in the speck called the Mayor Whoville. And the mayor is trying to get the rest of the city to raise up their voices to save their lives, is the climax of the book. And the Lord said, that's what I'm calling you to do, Chris. I'm calling you to call everybody to raise your voice. This is not a special calling for you, Chris, but you're called to get everyone to start saying something about abortion and start demanding it to be over, because it will be over. And I also think it has something to do with me being African American, because abortion affects the African American community like none other. We do 30% of the abortions, though we're only 12% of the nation. And so there's absolutely genocide going on in the black community, and our black leaders are silent, and it's kind of like a silent Holocaust period, and then the black community is being wiped out by abortion. So I believe that may be the reason why. And plus, I'm super weak. And
aren't we all? We need the Lord's power. Interesting. I love history, Chris, and so I'm a historian. I write about history. I really studied the Civil War and everything that led up to it, and the abolitionist movement. Frederick Douglass, very prominent in the abolitionist movement. So when people hear abolition, they think about the Civil War, freeing the slaves.
That's right.
That kind of language. Why are you using that language today when it comes to abortion?
Absolutely. Well, the problems are parallel almost, and I would say they're worse now. They had an issue in that day to recognize the African as human. They said that he wasn't human, and the abolitionists were, obviously that's kind of, to us now, we just go, what a craziness, but they were trying to convince the society that, they're made in God's image, and this is sin. The abolitionists of slavery were radical. They were calling the South all types of things. They were unrelenting, and they were calling for the end of slavery. They weren't calling for, maybe there were certain streams of the abolition movement that were maybe kind of trying to regulate some things, but most of the abolition movement wanted it to end. And so just as in that day that the black person was legally oppressed, today we're legally oppressing the baby in the womb, and we claim that person doesn't have human rights just like we did African. And so the abolitionist movement right now, we are calling for the absolute abolition of abortion. We're not calling for any regulation. We're not asking for week bans. we're saying end it now. And because it's sin, and the question we ask is, what does Christianity look like in a culture that kills its children? How should you and I and our churches be when our neighbors are murdering their children? I mean, it causes for all of us to be active. So also the abolitionists in that day were calling the church to repent of their silence and their apathy. And so that's the other thing that we're doing, is that we think the answer to ending abortion is actually everyone just doing something. If we and you and everyone listening actually begin to raise their voice, literally abortion could be over in a week. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. In the North, if I remember from the Civil War period and the decades leading up to that, many of the leaders of the abolitionist movement, both black and white, were pastors who from the pulpit did mix politics with the gospel and said, this is wrong what we're doing in the South. We cannot have half free and half slave. This cannot go on any longer. Today, we need the same thing. But I don't see a large group of pastors. There are many, but in terms of the percentage, very small numbers. Why is that?
Well, because we've kind of fallen into this false idea of callings. And I believe everyone has their calling. You're called to this church. I'm called to work with youth. But that doesn't, if a tornado came to this city, we don't ask each other, what's your calling? We just find a way to help. And so we don't see abortion as a disaster. We say, no, you're called to work with abortion. I'm called to do this. And that's not the case. When we have legal murdering of children, it's 30 a day in the Twin Cities. I mean, if we had a psycho killing kids in schools, running around killing kids in schools every day, we would do what we could to stop it. We wouldn't try to. So I think the churches, and I think also it's just a sense of, we're kind of frightened to bring it up. We don't feel like we have a real plan to abolish abortion. I believe the pro-life movement has done awesome things, but I also believe that a lot of pro-life movement has made it difficult to fight this thing. They made it confusing, and which we make it very simple.
Yep. By the end of the week, and I hope you listen all the way through, but on Friday, we're really going to challenge people about how to get involved, how to put dollars and effort and other things behind this. We really want this to be out front in front of people. Tell me, you're on the street, Chris. What are you seeing on the street when you talk to people about these things?
Wow. I see how far our culture has fallen. We all know that the culture is lost, but when you're actually talking to somebody and they are, we go to high schools and you're talking to a group of high schoolers and they're fighting you about that, abortion is right and the baby doesn't really deserve to. And you're using logic and you're saying, wait a minute, is it a human? And we think like Nazis, to be honest. Americans, we have that kind of mind frame. We don't say Jews, but we say the baby. We have okayed it in our minds. And so I guess I see that our society is really crumbled. You know what I mean? I see a lot of people who disagree with abortion too, and I call those people into action.
Yeah. I think it's Martin Luther King's niece, Coretta Scott King.
Yeah.
Marvelous evangelist. I've seen her on TV several times. She is very, very straightforward talking about these things. And it'd be marvelous if we could someday, you and I, sit down and interview her. But what I see her saying is, she just wrote a book called King's Way. But it's the King of Kings. It's Jesus, not Martin Luther King, who is a wonderful man. But it's really Jesus who's doing this. We need to desperately raise up leaders. Any plans for how to raise up or train leaders to get involved in this movement and to really get involved in speaking out in the local church?
Yes, and right before I answer that, I just want to go and just say that we believe that this is a love your neighbor issue too. I just want to say that is that a lot of times we forget that our neighbors, not just the poor guy down the road, or these unborn children are our neighbors. And I believe that the way we can raise up leaders is, because I was listening to your show last week and it was awesome. I believe that I'm raising up youth. I bring them to the abortion clinic with me. I bring them to the streets with me and we talk, we do evangelism. We sit down, we do Bible studies together. So doing life together, I invite people to come out and do the work. And I believe that's what Jesus did. Jesus didn't just sit down with them with the Torah, and I'm sure he did, but he brought them to the streets and he did the work. So we are making it easy at All Hands on Deck to get involved. There's really simple steps to get involved.
Nearly 40 years ago, when the abortion movement was young, I don't know what the abortion people were thinking, but they actually had open houses. I was back in Ohio. And they'd have open houses for the community to come and see the facility and see the modern tools and see how they're taking care of women and things like that. And I went.
Wow.
I decided to go on one just to see what really was all about. Midway through the tour, as the person's talking, there was a door open to a room that obviously was a room where they would do abortions, and I stepped in. I wanted to see. And there was like a garbage pail over in the corner, and I went and looked, Chris, and that totally changed. I mean, I was always biblical and thought this was wrong, but this turned me into a radical because I saw little heads, little hands, little feet. This is not a blob of tissue. These were people.
That's right.
And the tragedy is the number of children that we're losing each and every day in this country, and the fact there are very few people speaking out for them. So I am delighted that you're speaking out. I'm delighted that you're taking this risk. You know it's not easy. And people that want to get involved in your movement, want to know more about it, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, yep, you could email me at allhandsondeckmn@gmail.com. Also, you can find me on Facebook, and Facebook is All Hands on Deck, MN-AHA, and AHA stands for Abolish Human Abortion, and that's a way they can connect with me.
Yep, wonderful. Well, Leanne, we've done a lot of shows over these last 4 years. I think this one should really get people's interest.
I sure hope so. And I know that you had talked about there are simple steps to getting involved. We have maybe 30 seconds left. Are there a couple you can mention?
Well,
right
yeah,
now?
I'll run through them real quick and we'll explain them maybe tomorrow or something. But the first one is prayer. It's really simple. Begin to pray like crazy, like it's your kid that's going to die. The second one is go to the clinic, go to the place like Pastor Tom did. Go and see it. And you may not be able to go inside, but you'll see the girls go, and it'll break your heart. God will begin to, talk to you. 3, get loud about it. You, any way possible, talk about it at church, and then also demand for the abolition of it.
Well, thanks, Chris. Great show. As you can tell, very dynamic, full of passion. You're an awesome guest, and he'll be back again tomorrow. So we hope you'll join us again tomorrow for more Real Hope. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening to Real